Welcome to Martha Family Secrets. My name is Lily Harmon. I am 29 years old. And 3 days ago, my sister stood beside me at my own wedding and switched my vows with a letter she had written herself. I did not find out until I opened the envelope at the altar. The first line read, "I, Caroline, confess to my husband that I am not the person you think I am." That was not my handwriting. That was not my name. And 150 people were standing in those pews waiting for me to speak. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you are listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. But before I tell you what happened at that altar, I need to take you back 4 years. Because what my sister did that day did not begin at a church. It began at a lawyer's office on a Tuesday morning in September when our grandmother's will was read aloud in a room that went absolutely silent the moment her attorney reached the last paragraph. There is a house on Clover Hill Road in Mapleton, Georgia. 2 stories, white shutters, a covered front porch, and a rose garden along the south fence that has been blooming since 1979. My grandmother, Ruth Harmon, planted those first bushes the year she moved in. She was 32 years old then. Younger than I am now. Every summer of my childhood that house was my entire world. I would sit on the porch with Grandma Ruth in the late afternoon and shell butter beans into an old tin bowl while she told me stories about growing up in the Georgia countryside. She taught me how to make her sweet potato pie from memory. She taught me how to prune rose canes without flinching because she said you need to feel where the dead wood ends and the living wood begins. My sister Claire never came. Too quiet out there for her, too slow, her exact words. She stayed home with our parents in Hartwell, 2 hours north, and that was fine. The house on Clover Hill felt like mine and Grandma Ruth's. It always had. When Grandma Ruth was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer, I was 21 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in library sciences and $42,000 in student debt. I did not think twice. I packed 2 bags and moved into her back bedroom and became her full-time caregiver for the next 4 years. I drove her to chemotherapy every Monday morning, 90 minutes each way. I slept in the recliner beside her hospital bed more nights than I can count. I cooked, I cleaned, I managed her medications, I kept her records, I talked to her doctors, I held her hand through every hard day and every harder night. My parents visited maybe 6 times total across those 4 years. Claire came twice. Both times she walked through the rooms with a quiet, measuring kind of attention I mistook at the time for interest. She opened closet doors. She stood in doorways and looked toward the windows. She ran her fingers along the kitchen counter with an expression I could not read. She was calculating the square footage. I did not know that yet. Grandma Ruth died on a Wednesday morning in October. I was holding her hand when it happened. The monitor went flat and the room got very still and I sat beside her for a long time before I reached for my phone. The funeral was small and warm the way she would have wanted. Half of Mapleton came. My parents drove down from Hartwell. Claire flew in from Atlanta where she had just gotten her real estate license. She wore sunglasses inside the church. I noticed that. 3 days after the funeral, Grandma Ruth's attorney read her will in his office on Main Street. Her savings, roughly $14,000, split evenly among my parents, Claire, and me. Her furniture and her old Chevrolet divided as we saw fit. And the house on Clover Hill Road, left solely and entirely to me. The silence in that room is something I will never forget as long as I live. My mother stood up first. Her name is Patricia Harmon, 62 years old, and when she wants her voice to carry it carries. She lived there rent-free for 4 years and now she gets the house. That is what she said. Not a question. A verdict. My father, Douglas, said nothing at all. He looked at me once, a long flat look, and then he walked out of the office and stood in the parking lot with his hands deep in his pockets. Claire laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind that scrapes the back of the throat. Congratulations, she said. You won. I tried to explain. Grandma Ruth wanted me to have it. I did not ask for it. I did not manipulate anyone. I showed up every single day for 4 years while the rest of you did not. That is all that happened. Nobody wanted to hear it. And I did not know it that afternoon, standing in that parking lot watching my father stare at nothing, but my mother already had a plan. A reason for her reaction that went far beyond grief or sentiment. A reason I would not fully understand for months. They wanted the house. And eventually, they decided they were going to find a way to take it. Stay with me. Because what they did to get it is something I am still not entirely over. It started within a week. On a Wednesday morning I opened my phone and the family group chat was gone. No announcement, no explanation. I just opened my messages and it was not there anymore. When I texted Claire about it she left me on read for 3 days and then blocked my number entirely. Then the phone calls started. Not to me. About me. My mother worked through her contact list the way a campaign manager works a phone bank. She called every aunt, every uncle, every cousin on both sides of the family. The message was always the same. Lily manipulated Grandma Ruth when she was sick. Lily isolated her. Lily made sure nobody else was in the room when the will was signed. None of it was true. Not a single word. The only person who called me directly was my mother's younger sister, Aunt Carol Pearson, who lived in Brunswick 2 hours south. She was always the straight-talking one in the family. "Honey," she said when I picked up, "your mother is telling everyone you stole that house from a dying woman. I thought you should know before you walked into Thanksgiving not knowing what was coming." I thanked her. I did not cry. Not yet. The proof that the isolation was working came 6 weeks later at my cousin's bridal shower in Folkestone. I drove 1 hour and 40 minutes to be there. When I arrived, no one saved me a seat. I was placed alone at a small table near the kitchen door, separated from every table that had family at it. During the appetizers, I heard Claire's voice carry across the patio. She was talking to a group of cousins, and they all turned at the same time and looked at me. Then they looked away. I drove home in the dark. Pulled into the driveway on Clover Hill, sat in the car for a long time, and stared at Grandma Ruth's rose garden through the windshield. The bushes had gotten overgrown. I had been neglecting them since the funeral and they showed it. I went inside and I sat at her kitchen table and I said out loud to nobody at all, "I am not selling this house." Then Aunt Carol called again. "There is something else you need to know," she said. "Your mother has not made a mortgage payment on the house in Hartwell in over 3 months. That is what this is really about." And then it made sense. All of it at once. Claire started calling at night, never during the day. She knew I worked at the Mapleton Public Library from 8 to 5. So she called at 11. At midnight. At 1 in the morning. Always from her cell phone, never blocked, so her name would flash across my dark bedroom ceiling like a taunt. The first few calls were businesslike, almost reasonable. She talked about fair market value and listing agents and what the house would bring in the current market. She quoted a number. "Split 3 ways that would be about $90,000 each," she said. "Think about what you could do with $90,000, Lily." I said no. The calls got uglier after that. She mentioned contesting the will. She mentioned hiring an attorney. She said things that I will not repeat word for word, but that amounted to, "I will make your life very difficult and you have no idea what I am capable of." One night at 2 in the morning she asked, "How much would it take to make this go away?" "It is not about money," I said. "Everything is about money," she said. "You just do not know it yet." Then my father sent an email. My father, Douglas Harmon, is not a man of many words. So when he wrote something it landed differently than when my mother or Claire said things. The email was 3 sentences. "Your grandmother would be ashamed of what you are doing to this family. Sell the house. End this." That one hurt worse than anything Claire had said. The phone calls I could set down. My father's handwriting on a screen, those 3 sentences that I carried. I stopped sleeping well. My supervisor at the library, a kind woman named Frances, asked me once if I was all right because I had been quiet in a way she had not seen before. I lost weight. I started checking the locks on the front door twice before bed, something I had never done in my life. One evening my boyfriend James was at my kitchen table. We had been together for 7 months. Claire called at midnight and I made the mistake of answering on speaker because my hands were full. He heard everything. When I hung up I was shaking in the particular way you shake when the adrenaline has nowhere to go. James did not say a word. He just pulled me into his chest and held me there. It was the first time he saw me cry about my family. It would not be the last. I want to be very clear about something before I go further. I did not want a war with my family. I never wanted that. 6 months after the will was read I sat at Grandma Ruth's kitchen table and wrote a long careful email to my parents and Claire. I proposed a compromise. The house stays in my name, non-negotiable, but I would open it to the whole family. Holidays at Clover Hill, summer weekends, anyone could visit anytime without asking. Grandma Ruth would have wanted the family in this house. I genuinely believed that. My mother replied the same day. One sentence. We do not want to visit your house. We want what is fair. I tried again. I called Claire and suggested lunch at a diner halfway between Mapleton and Atlanta. She agreed, which surprised me. I drove an hour and 20 minutes. She was already seated when I got there. She had not ordered food. List the house, she said. Split it 3 ways. That is the only conversation I am having with you today. Diane, I began. And she cut me off. You sound exactly like Grandma Ruth. Stubborn and selfish. I set $30 on the table, enough to cover both meals, and I left without saying another word. There was nothing left to say. 2 weeks after that I found out Claire had contacted a local realtor and asked her to run a market analysis on Grandma Ruth's house. My house. Without my knowledge and without my permission. The realtor called me directly because my name was on the deed. Your sister told me you were co-owners, she said. But that is not what the title shows. I offered them a table at every holiday. They wanted the whole house. And somewhere in Atlanta, Claire was already planning something far worse. I just did not know it yet. Then James proposed. On a Saturday evening in the rose garden. He had been helping me restore it for weeks, pruning and mulching and carefully replacing the canes that had died during the months I had let everything go. We were kneeling in the soil side by side and he pulled a ring from his jacket pocket like it was the most natural thing in the world. No grand speech. Just Lily, will you marry me? I said yes, with dirt on my hands and tears running down my face. We set the date for 8 months out. The ceremony at Mapleton Community Church, the same church where Grandma Ruth's funeral was held, and the reception in the fellowship hall next door. We budgeted $8,000. Tight but real. I told my parents. I braced for coldness. Instead, I got warmth. And looking back now, that warmth should have been my very first warning. My mother called within an hour. Her voice was soft in a way I had not heard in 4 years. Let us help, sweetheart. Claire and I can handle the decorations and the day of coordination. It will save you a fortune. James was cautious. It is your call, he said. But if they are offering, that is probably close to $2,000 we do not have to spend. I wanted to believe they were coming around. I wanted my mother at my wedding. I wanted my sister standing beside me. So I said yes, but with 3 conditions I made very clear. I would write my own vows. I would choose my own dress. And I would choose the photographer. Claire accepted the role of maid of honor. Part of that role, she explained very sweetly, was holding my vow envelope during the ceremony and handing it to me at the altar. That is tradition, she said. That is what sisters do. And I handed her the one thing she needed to destroy me. Stay with me. Because what happened at that rehearsal dinner and what was recorded in a dark hallway that night is the part that changes everything. James chose our photographer, his college friend Nathan Briggs. 38 years old, meticulous, the kind of person who documents everything as a reflex. James said you will love his footage. I had no idea how completely right he was. The rehearsal dinner was at the only sit-down restaurant in Mapleton, a place called Garland's that had been there since before I was born. 15 people around a long table. The wedding party, immediate family, James's parents, Nathan. Everything felt almost normal in a way I kept trying to talk myself into trusting. My father sat at the far end of the table and ate his dinner without much comment. My mother moved between conversations the way she does when she is in a room she wants to own, refilling glasses, laughing a little too easily, touching shoulders. She hugged me in front of everyone near the end of the evening. She pressed her cheek against mine and said, "I am so proud of you, baby." She had not called me baby in 4 years. I wanted to believe it. I cannot explain how badly I wanted to believe it. After dinner, Claire collected the vow envelopes, mine and James's both. She held them up with a little smile. "I will keep these safe in the bridal suite tonight." She tucked them into her bag and winked at me. "Do not worry about a thing." Nathan was sitting in the corner of the room with a glass of sweet tea, the quiet observer he always was at social gatherings. He told me later what he saw from that corner. Claire leaving the table early. My mother following her about 2 minutes later. Neither of them returning for close to 20 minutes. Nathan had brought his camera. He was testing the low light settings in the church for the next day, which gave him a legitimate reason to be moving through the hallways with equipment running. He set the camera recording on a shelf in the bridal suite corridor while he checked the sanctuary lighting from a different angle. A small, practical, almost casual decision that would end up being the most important thing that happened that entire weekend. That night I drove home to Clover Hill. I lay on Grandma Ruth's bed and read through my vows one last time. I had written them by hand on cream-colored stationery with a slight texture that I had saved from a box she kept in her nightstand. The closing line was about the roses. About showing up. About love being a quiet daily choice rather than a grand performance. James called at 11. "Tomorrow we get married," he said. "Tomorrow," I said. I slept well that night. I should not have. I woke up at 6 to October light coming thin and gold through the bedroom curtains. The rose garden was heavy with dew. I went outside in my robe and slippers and stood among the bushes for a long time. The survivors, the pink climbers in the third row, were still holding their last blooms of the season. I touched one and it was cold and perfect. I drove to the church at 9. The fellowship hall had been transformed overnight. White linens on every table, mason jars full of wildflowers, string lights hung in careful arcs across the ceiling. Claire and my mother had worked harder than I expected and I made the mistake of letting that soften something in me. Claire helped me into my dress in the bridal suite. A simple ivory A-line I had found at a consignment shop in town for $280. She zipped the back, straightened the hem, and stepped back. "You look beautiful," she said. And for one unguarded second, one real honest second, she looked like my sister again. The girl who used to braid my hair before school. The one who carried me piggyback across Grandma Ruth's backyard until I was probably too old for it. My throat tightened. "Thank you, Claire." I meant it completely. She smiled. "Today is going to be unforgettable," she said. "I promise you that." The vow envelope was waiting on the dressing table. I picked it up and something small registered in my fingers before I had time to process it. The paper felt different. Brighter, stiffer, more like printer paper than the soft cream stationery I had used. I turned it over in my hands. Maybe she transferred it to a nicer envelope, I thought. That would be exactly like her, the real estate agent in her always particular about presentation. I set it down without opening it. I wanted to save the emotion. I wanted to feel every word for the first time when I read them to James in front of everyone. That decision, not opening it in the bridal suite, is the one I replay most. 150 people filled the pews of Mapleton Community Church that afternoon. Family from both sides, colleagues from the library, neighbors who had known Grandma Ruth for decades. Mrs. Elaine Cooper from across the road, who was 80 years old and had known my grandmother for 40 years. James's parents, Robert and Jean, drove up from Valdosta. His college friends took the third row on the left. The organ started. My father took my arm at the back of the church. He was wearing a suit I had never seen before, charcoal gray, a little tight across the shoulders. He did not say anything as we walked down the aisle. His grip was firm and his eyes were straight ahead. James was standing at the altar in a navy suit and his eyes were red before I even reached him. Nathan was positioned at the left corner with his camera up. My mother was in the front row, clutching a handkerchief. Claire stood in the maid of honor position with her bouquet at her waist and a perfectly still smile on her face. Pastor Williams opened with a reading from 1 Corinthians, then a hymn, then the rings. Everything moved the way a wedding is supposed to move, almost dreamlike. Then he said, "The bride and groom have written their own vows. James, you may begin." James pulled a folded paper from his breast pocket. His hands were steady. He read slowly and clearly, and every single word was true. He talked about the first time he saw Grandma Ruth's rose garden. About the evening he realized he loved me. I had been reshelving books at the library after closing and singing under my breath, and I had not known he was standing in the doorway watching. He said, "I fell in love with you the night you showed me your grandmother's garden and told me, this is who I am." I was crying before he finished. Not quietly. The full kind. Pastor Williams turned to me. "Lily, your turn." I opened the envelope. The paper was wrong. It registered in my hands before my eyes had caught up. Smooth, bright white, clean machine-cut edges. My vows were written on textured cream stationery. This was not my paper. I unfolded it. The first line read, "I, Caroline, confess to my husband that I am not the person you think I am." My vision narrowed. The words below blurred and swam, but I caught fragments. Manipulated her in her final years. Debts I have never told you about. Our marriage is built on a lie. 3 seconds. That is how long I stood there. 3 seconds that stretched into something enormous and silent. This was not my handwriting. This was typed. This was not even my name. My name is Lily. I looked up. 150 faces looked back at me. Some confused, some leaning forward slightly with that specific concern that crosses a room when something has gone visibly wrong. James had taken half a step forward. His brow was tight. "Lily, are you okay?" I looked at Claire. She was standing 4 feet to my left, bouquet at her waist, face completely still. Not surprised. Not confused. Still, the way a person is still when they are waiting for something they already know is coming. I looked at my mother in the front row. Her handkerchief was frozen against her cheek. Her eyes were locked on mine. The church was so quiet I could hear the ceiling fan turning overhead. I understood it then. Not every detail, those would come later. But the shape of it. The 4 years of pressure and midnight phone calls and family group chats gone quiet and cousins who looked away. All of it had been funneling toward this moment, this altar, this audience. They wanted me to crumble in front of every single person who had spent 4 years being told I was the selfish one. They wanted visible, public, undeniable proof. 150 people were watching me. And my sister was counting on my falling apart. I folded the paper. My hands were shaking, but I folded it in half and then in half again, and I held it at my side. I took one breath. Then another. James reached for my hand. I took it. I stepped closer to the microphone. "It seems my written vows have been misplaced," I said. My voice was steady in a way that surprised even me. "So I am going to speak from my heart instead." A ripple of whispers moved through the pews. I did not look at Claire. I did not look at my mother. I looked at James. And I spoke. Not the polished sentences I had spent weeks writing, but the truth underneath them. I talked about Grandma Ruth's rose garden and what it means to show up for someone when it is hard, not just when it is easy. About James kneeling in the dirt beside me replanting a dead rosebush not because anyone asked him to but because it mattered to me. About choosing someone. I do not need a piece of paper to tell you who I am, I said. You already know. James squeezed my hand so hard my knuckles pressed together. Pastor Williams pronounced us husband and wife. James kissed me and 150 people applauded and the organ played and we walked back down that aisle together. I kept the folded letter. I did not throw it away. I did not tear it up. I slipped it into the hidden pocket sewn into the lining of my dress. I was going to need it later. Now I need to stop for just a moment. Because I know some of you are thinking, why did you not read that letter out loud right there at the microphone? Why did you not hold it up and let 150 people hear exactly what your sister wrote? Honestly, I thought about it for about 4 seconds standing at that altar. But here is the thing. That was my wedding. Those were my vows to James. And I was not going to let Claire turn my altar into her stage. She wanted a scene. She wanted me hysterical and humiliated in front of the same people she had spent 4 years working against me. If I had exploded right there, every person in those pews would have walked away saying, well, Patricia was right about that girl all along. I chose my husband over my anger. I chose my dignity over the satisfaction of a public confrontation. But I want you to understand, I was not done. Not even close. What would you have done in that moment, standing at the altar holding a fake letter your own sister wrote to humiliate you in front of everyone you love? Would you have read it out loud right there, walked out of the church, confronted her on the spot, or done what I did? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Stay with me. Because the reception is where everything changed. The reception was in the fellowship hall next door. String lights, long buffet tables, speakers playing music, the kind of warm loud comfortable noise that a room full of people who love you makes when they are well fed and glad to be somewhere. I smiled. I hugged guests. I thanked people for coming. Under the table James held my left hand with both of his. What happened up there, he whispered. Not here, I said. Soon. 20 minutes into the reception, Nathan appeared at my shoulder and leaned in close. Lily, he said quietly, I need to show you something right now. James stood immediately. The three of us slipped out through a side door into the hallway. Fluorescent light, linoleum floor, the sound of laughter muffled through the wall. Nathan had his camera. He flipped the view screen and pressed play. The footage was from the night before. The bridal suite hallway. Low light, slightly grainy, but perfectly clear. Timestamp 8:49 p.m. Claire walked into the frame from the right. She moved with purpose, no hesitation, no looking around. She went straight to the dressing table, opened the small decorative box, and removed my cream-colored envelope. She set it to the side. She placed a white envelope in its place. And standing directly behind her, partially in the doorway, holding the white envelope out with both hands, was my mother. She passed it to Claire the way you would hand someone a grocery list. Casual. Practiced. They exchanged a few words the camera was too far away to catch. Then they walked out of frame together. The whole thing took less than 90 seconds. I watched it twice. James watched it once and closed his eyes. How long have you known? James asked Nathan. I reviewed the footage this morning, Nathan said. I could not get to you alone before the ceremony. I am sorry. James looked at me. What do you want to do? I leaned against the hallway wall. Through the door I could hear music and glasses and my mother's laugh rising above the other sounds. She was in there right now playing the proud mother of the bride. Hugging relatives. Pressing that handkerchief to her eyes. For years, I said to no one in particular. 4 years of midnight phone calls and being erased from the family chat and sitting alone at my cousin's wedding while Claire pointed me out like something to avoid. My father emailing me 3 sentences telling me Grandma Ruth would be ashamed of me. My mother calling every aunt and uncle with the same story about the granddaughter who stole a dying woman's house. And now this. My wedding vows. The most personal thing I had ever written in my life, swapped out for a typed confession designed to break me in front of 150 witnesses. I am not going to make a scene, I said. But I am not going to pretend this did not happen. James studied my face for a long moment. What are you thinking? The slideshow, I said. During the toast. Everyone will already be watching the screen. Nolan nodded slowly. The projector is already set up. I can switch the input in 30 seconds. James held my eyes. Are you sure? I looked at him. They counted on me staying quiet. That is what I have always done. He did not argue with that. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded letter. He had been holding it since the ceremony. You will want this too, he said. We walked back into the reception. I fixed my smile. My mother came over immediately and pressed her palm to my cheek. Beautiful ceremony, honey. Just beautiful. Thank you, Mom. I held her hand against my face for 1 second. The best is still to come, I said. She smiled. She had no idea. I want to pause here for just a moment because right before we walked back into that reception hall, something happened that nearly broke me open before I was ready. I was crossing the room toward our head table when I saw her. At a small table near the far exit, sitting quietly by herself with a glass of sweet tea and her silver hair pinned up. A woman in a plum-colored dress I would recognize anywhere. Aunt Carol. My mother's younger sister. The one my mother had systematically cut out of family events for siding with me 4 years earlier. She was not on the guest list. I knew that for certain because I had gone over that list myself. I stopped walking. My eyes burned the way they do right before something gives way. I crossed the room and wrapped my arms around her before I could think about it. She smelled like gardenia perfume. The same kind Grandma Ruth used to dab behind her ears on Sunday mornings. How are you here? I whispered. James called me last week, she said into my hair. He told me the date and the time and said you would want me here even if your mother did not. I pulled back and looked at her face. She was already reading mine the way she always could, the way that specific kind of woman always can. Something happened tonight, she said. It was not a question. Yes. My mother spotted us from across the room. I watched the color drain from her face the way water drains from a tilted glass. She crossed the hall fast, heels clicking. What are you doing here, Beverly? She said, her voice tight. Aunt Carol did not stand. She picked up her sweet tea and took a small sip and set it down carefully. I am at my niece's wedding, Patricia. She looked up at my mother. Sit down. My mother stared at her, then at me. Then she turned and walked away without another word. Aunt Carol took my hand. Her grip was warm and absolutely steady. Whatever is happening tonight, she said quietly, you stand your ground. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. Her voice dropped. One more thing. Your mother called me last week. She said you were going to learn a lesson at this wedding. I did not know what she meant. But I am here. The room felt 10 degrees colder. I squeezed her hand once and let go. I had work to do. At 8 o'clock our MC tapped the microphone and announced that the bride and groom had prepared a wedding slideshow. The lights dimmed. The projector came on. Photos began cycling across the screen. James as a small child. Me at 7, both front teeth missing. The two of us at a county fair last summer. And then Grandma Ruth, sitting in her garden with a watering can, dirt on her knees, smiling at whoever was holding the camera. A soft sound moved through the older guests who had known her. I watched the photos for a minute. Then I stood up. James squeezed my hand once under the table. I picked up the wireless microphone from the head table and walked to the front of the room. Stay with me. Because what happened in the next 10 minutes is the part one have had to sit with every day since. Thank you all for being here tonight, I said. Thank you to everyone who helped make this day possible. I looked at my mother. I looked at Claire. Especially my mother and sister who volunteered to handle the decorations and coordination. It saved us so much. They smiled. My mother inclined her head with the modest grace of someone accepting a compliment she believed she deserved. I took a breath. Before we continue, there is something I need to share with everyone in this room. Something that happened tonight that I think all of you should see. The smiles faded. I reached into James's jacket hanging over my chair and pulled out the folded letter. I held it up. A single sheet of white printer paper. This is not my wedding vows, I said. My voice was completely steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. Someone replaced my vows with this letter before the ceremony began. I found out when I opened the envelope at the altar. The room went dead silent. 150 people. Not a cough. Not a shifted chair. I want you all to see how it happened. I nodded at Nathan. He pressed play. The bridal suite hallway filled the projection screen. Slightly grainy, low light, timestamp reading 8:49 p.m. the previous evening. Claire walked into frame from the right, moving with clear direction and purpose. No hesitation. She went straight to the dressing table, opened the decorative box, removed a cream-colored envelope, set it aside, and placed a white envelope in its place. Then the second figure appeared. Standing in the doorway, holding the white envelope out with both hands. My mother. She passed it to Claire with the calm efficiency of someone who had rehearsed the motion. Claire placed it in the box. My mother touched her shoulder. They exchanged a few words, relaxed and unhurried. Then they walked out of frame together. Timestamp 8:50 p.m. 90 seconds, start to finish. The screen went dark. Nobody moved. Then it came. Not gasps, not shouting. Something worse than either of those things. A low collective sound that started in different parts of the room simultaneously and spread like water finding level. Chairs shifted. Heads turned. 150 people looked from the blank screen to the front row. My mother was on her feet. Her face had gone the color of uncooked dough. That is not what it looks like, she said. Her voice was too high and too fast. You have to understand. Claire had not moved. She was still in her maid of honor chair, bouquet on the table in front of her, face absolutely white and locked. Not defending herself. Not moving at all. My father sat at the end of the head table with both hands flat on the surface, staring at the tablecloth in front of him. The murmur in the room grew. I could hear fragments from different directions. At her own wedding. Her mother. Ruthie's granddaughter. I still had the microphone. Since you have all seen how this letter came to be in my hands, I said, I think you deserve to hear what was written on it. I unfolded it. I read it aloud. All of it. Every typed word. I, Caroline, confess to my husband that I am not the person he thinks I am. I manipulated my grandmother in her final years to secure her estate. I carry debts I have never disclosed. Our marriage is built on deception. I lowered the paper. I looked out at the room. None of this is true, I said. Every word of it was written to humiliate me in front of all of you today. In front of the people I love most. On the most important day of my life. At a table near the window, a woman stood up. Mrs. Elaine Cooper, 80 years old, Grandma Ruth's closest neighbor and friend for over 40 years. She had one hand pressed over her mouth and she was weeping openly, shoulders shaking, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere very deep. Claire finally spoke. Her voice came out thin and controlled in the particular way of someone who has run out of composure but is still trying to hold the shape of it. Lily. Stop. You are making a scene. I turned to face her directly. I am making a scene, I said. The microphone caught every syllable. You replaced my wedding vows with a fabricated confession, and you did it the night before my wedding. Our mother handed you the envelope. 150 people just watched it happen on that screen. She opened her mouth. Closed it. I did not wait for whatever came next. I looked out at the room. At the faces of people who had been told for 4 years that I was the selfish granddaughter who stole a dying woman's house. At cousins who had looked away from me at family gatherings. At aunts and uncles who had taken my mother's phone calls and believed what she told them. You wanted me silent, I said. You wanted me small. You wanted me to fall apart in front of everyone who had been told I was the villain. Not today. Then my mother's voice pitched upward and broke. You ungrateful. After everything I have done. After 2 days I spent decorating this hall. Patricia. The voice came from the back of the room. Steady, clear, carrying across every head in that silent space. Aunt Carol was on her feet. Plum dress, silver hair, sweet tea still in her hand. She set the glass down on the table. What have you done, she said. It was not loud, but it reached every corner. You told this entire family for 4 years that she stole that house. You called me last week and told me she was going to learn a lesson tonight. She paused. Is this your lesson, Patricia? My mother spun toward her. Beverly, you do not understand what she. I was there the day Mama Ruth signed that will, Aunt Carol said. I drove her to the attorney myself. I sat in that room. She knew exactly what she was doing. She paused to let it settle. She told me Lily was the only one who stayed. And she was right. The murmur in the room had become something heavier. Women in the back rows were shaking their heads. One of James's uncles pushed his chair back slowly from the table. My mother looked around the room for someone on her side. There was no one. My father stood. He took her by the elbow. Let us go, he said. We are not leaving, Douglas. We are going now. He walked her toward the exit with one hand firm at her elbow. She was still talking, still gesturing, her voice getting smaller with each step. The door opened and closed behind them. No one followed. Then Tyler, my cousin, 26 years old, Claire's friend since they were children, stood up at his table. His voice shook when he spoke. Diane asked me to keep Nathan away from the bridal area last night. She told me he was being inappropriate and to keep him busy at the bar. He looked at me. I did not know why until right now. I am sorry, Lily. Claire was alone. Standing at the head table with her bouquet untouched in front of her and 150 people looking at her and not one of them on her side. I walked toward her and stopped 3 feet away. I lowered the microphone to my hip. I did not need amplification for what I wanted to say. Tell me in the comments. And if you have dealt with something similar, share your story. You are not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. You think you are better than everyone here, Claire said. Her mascara had begun to track down her face. No, I said. I think I deserve to say my wedding vows without them being stolen. That house should have been split. Grandma Ruth was not thinking clearly at the end. Grandma Ruth was sharper at 82 than you are standing here right now. I held her eyes. She knew who showed up every morning and she knew who walked through her hallways measuring the rooms. Something moved across Claire's face. The defiance drained out of it. She remembered. I could see her remembering. The tape measure. The closet doors. The questions about the master bedroom dimensions. She knew I remembered. And now there were 150 people who had just enough context to understand exactly what I meant. I am not going to stand here and fight with you at my wedding, I said. But I need you to hear this. We are finished. Not because I hate you. Because I cannot keep letting you hurt me. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice settling in a glass somewhere near the back. Claire looked left. She looked right. Nobody moved toward her. Nobody spoke. She picked up her clutch from the table, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the door. Her heels clicked on the linoleum, each step echoing in that enormous quiet room. The door swung shut. James crossed the room and put his arms around me from behind. The microphone was still live. 150 people heard him say, "I have got you. And I want to be honest with you here." Standing there watching the door close behind my sister, I did not feel like I had won anything. I felt hollow in the particular way you feel hollow when you finally stop bending for someone who was never going to stop taking the space you gave them. It is necessary. It costs you something. And anyone who tells you otherwise has never had to choose between their dignity and their family. But here is what happened next. And this is the part one did not expect. Aunt Carol stood up at her table. She lifted her glass of sweet tea and spoke to James and me. "To honesty," she said. "To love that keeps showing up." 150 people stood up. The applause that followed was not the polite kind. It was the gut kind, uneven and loud, some people hitting the tables with their palms. Mrs. Cooper crossed the room with her hands trembling and wrapped her arms around me. "Ruthie would have cheered," she said into my shoulder. "She would have stood right up and cheered for you." That is when I cried. Not at the altar. Not in the hallway. Here, in the arms of an 80-year-old woman who had known my grandmother for 40 years. I cried because I was lighter. Because 4 years of being called a thief and a manipulator and a selfish granddaughter had just been seen for what it actually was. Not by me telling people. By a camera left running in a dark hallway by a man who just wanted to test his light settings. The DJ put on Louis Armstrong. James took my hand and led me to the floor and we danced, not gracefully. I stepped on his foot twice and he laughed both times, and for the first time since 2 o'clock that afternoon I was just a bride dancing with her husband. That was enough. That was everything. 2 days later my phone rang at 9 in the morning. "Claire." I answered on speaker. James raised an eyebrow from across the kitchen. "You destroyed this family," she said. Her voice was flat in the emptied-out way of someone who had been crying for 2 days. "No," I said. "You replaced my wedding vows with a fake confession in front of 150 people. You did that." Silence on the line. "Mom and Dad are not speaking to me," she said. "Tyler told Aunt Carol everything. People at work are asking questions. Someone posted about the wedding." I let her talk. I did not interrupt. "Can we at least talk about the house?" she said finally. "Goodbye, Claire." I hung up. Set the phone face down on the table. A cardinal landed on the fence post outside the kitchen window. Grandma Ruth used to say cardinals were messages from the people who loved you and were gone. I sat with that for a while. A week later I found an envelope under the front door. No stamp, no return address. My father's handwriting, small and cramped, the letters leaning left the way they always had. He must have driven the 2 hours from Hartwell and slid it under the door without knocking. It was not an apology. My father is not a man who apologizes. What he wrote was something quieter and clumsier and harder to set aside because of it. Lily. I should have stopped it. I did not. Your mother has been frightened about the mortgage for 2 years and I let that fear turn into something I should not have allowed. None of what happened excuses what we did. I will not ask you to forgive me. I do not think I have earned that. But I want you to know that I remember your grandmother's roses. I helped her plant the first ones in 1979. She made me dig all the holes because she said my hands were bigger. That was all. No mention of the house. No request. Just a man admitting he let fear make him cruel and one memory of digging holes for rosebushes 46 years ago. I read it twice sitting on the porch swing. Then I folded it and put it in Grandma Ruth's nightstand drawer, next to her reading glasses and her Bible. I did not write back that day. I was not ready. Some doors need to stay closed for a while before you decide whether to open them again. But I did not tear it up either. 3 months passed. January came and stripped the rose garden bare, but the roots stayed alive under the mulch. James and I settled into the house on Clover Hill the way water settles into a place made for it. He built bookshelves in the living room with reclaimed oak. I lined them with library discards and Grandma Ruth's old paperbacks. I put a little free library on the front porch, a small wooden box with a glass front panel, painted white to match the shutters. I called it Ruthie's Corner. Mrs. Cooper was the first person to leave a book. By February there were 53. Aunt Carol drove up from Brunswick every other Sunday for dinner. She sat in Grandma Ruth's chair at the head of the table and told stories about their childhood, about Ruth sneaking out to dances, about the time she chased a neighbor's rooster across the yard in her church dress. James laughed so hard at that one he choked on his sweet tea. Tyler started coming too. He brought produce from his girlfriend's garden, sweet potatoes and collards and late tomatoes. He never mentioned Claire. Neither did I. My father sent a second letter in February. It was shorter. I enrolled in financial counseling at the church. Your mother and I are working with the bank on a repayment plan. No one is coming for your house. I am sorry it took me this long to say that. I sat at Grandma Ruth's kitchen table and wrote back on a piece of her cream stationery. 4 sentences. I am glad you are getting help, Dad. The roses are dormant but the roots are strong. James built a porch swing that faces the garden. I thought you should know that. In March I found my real vows. I was helping Pastor Williams organize the church storage room when I found my ivory cardigan hanging on a hook in the bridal suite closet. I had worn it to the rehearsal dinner and forgotten it completely. I reached into the pocket and felt paper. Cream-colored, textured, folded in thirds. Claire had not thrown my vows away. She had hidden them in my own coat pocket. Maybe she thought I would find them weeks later and understand what she had taken from me. Maybe it was insurance in case the swap was discovered too early. I did not spend much time on the why. I cared about the words. I brought them home. That evening, when the light was low and gold the way it gets in late March in South Georgia, I took James out to the rose garden. The pink climbers in the 3rd row, the survivors, the ones Grandma Ruth called her stubbornest roses, had their first new buds of the season just beginning to open. I read my vows to him out loud. Standing in the dirt. No microphone, no audience, no one watching. I learned what love looks like by watching my grandmother tend these roses every morning, I read. Love is not grand gestures. It is showing up. It is staying. It is choosing someone again and again even when it costs you something. James, I choose you today and tomorrow and every morning in this garden. He cried. I had never seen James cry before. Not at the altar, not in any of the hard months before, not once in 3 years together. But here, in the rose garden in the late afternoon light with no one watching, he let go completely. That was worth the wait, he said. I framed the vows that night. Set them on the bookshelf he built, right beside Grandma Ruth's photograph. She is smiling in it, kneeling in the roses, dirt on her knees, looking up at whoever is holding the camera. It felt like she was there. Here is where things stand today. I still live in Grandma Ruth's house on Clover Hill Road. The roses are blooming. Ruthie's Corner on the front porch has over 60 books in it now. The porch swing James built faces the garden, just like I told my father. Aunt Carol comes for dinner every other Sunday. Tyler brings sweet potatoes. Mrs. Cooper leaves a new book in the box every Tuesday morning without fail. Claire has not reached out since that phone call. My mother has not spoken to me. My father sends a letter every few weeks, short and careful, never asking for anything. I write back when I am ready. Sometimes that takes a day. Sometimes it takes 3 weeks. That is enough for now. I do not tell this story because I wanted revenge. I tell it because for 4 years I was the villain in someone else's version of events, and the only way to correct that was to let the truth be seen. Not argued. Not explained. Seen. If you have ever had to stand up to your own family, not because you wanted a fight, but because they left you no other choice, I see you. And I want you to know this. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is survival. Setting a boundary with the people who raised you is one of the hardest things a person can do. And doing it with your dignity intact, in front of everyone who was told you were the problem, is something nobody can take back from you. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks, and you choose who holds the key. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do that now. There are more stories coming, and I think the next one is going to stay with you. One last thing. If I could go back to that altar and open that envelope again, knowing everything I know now, I would not change a single thing. Not one. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.